Hey everybody, today's date is December 13th, 2024. It is actually just a little bit after 7 p.m. and I just wanted to go ahead and start this conversation while also realizing this is my first time doing a YouTube Live like this. I introduced it on Facebook and I don't know if it's attempting to create a Facebook link for it to go live because now it's 7 o'clock. I've also been using StreamYard because I know that can go to multiple locations at the same time. It can go to, I think for me, I have it set up to do Facebook, YouTube, and well, actually in StreamYard, so it records in StreamYard. But I don't know how all this is going to come together, so I'm just going to go ahead and go with it. I know right now, oh, that's not great. Maybe it's okay. I don't know. But anyways, we're here, and I want to talk about a subject matter that, I hear a lot of people discussing that is not necessarily described as apathy. And typically it sounds like nobody cares, nobody's listening. All of these horrific things are happening oftentimes to children, oftentimes to safe or legally mandated, lawfully protective parents. And, people will start talking about how ultimately, everything from family courts to CPS to police to family to friends to coworkers to community members, most dishearteningly, religious communities, right? They don't find the support that good people would be expected to give when, they're hearing about abuses, right? Abuses of power domestically and systemically, which a lot of times they are lock and sync together, right? One is accompanying the other if and when the underlying dynamic of family court is at play, is at issue. And what do I mean by at issue? What this means is typically it doesn't always have to be during the course of a relationship or a marriage. Oftentimes it is after separation or what they call a dissolution in some states. I know in Texas, that's what they call a divorce lawsuit, is a dissolution of marriage. Typically, a lot of times this is when the most allegations are going to come out, just as a nature of if people are still there, a lot of times there's one of two things that are occurring. Number one is they're still trying to give the relationship an opportunity, last-ditch effort. Maybe there's counseling, maybe there's been multiple attempts, forgive, forget, give other chances, they're sorry, they're going to get better, then honeymoon period, it does get better and it gets worse again, right? They're going through the what we call cycle of abuse, right? And that may mean that the public outcry of abuse allegations oftentimes may not be happening until they've realized, like, there is nothing that can be done here. That's it. Relationship's over. We are going and what I call fighting for our freedom. It's over. It's done. And now we can talk about why it's done, right? And so what a lot of people will say, the way that they will flip and turn that in what we call DARVO, which is an abuser playbook tactic. DARVO is to deny, attack, reverse, victim, offender. They'll say, oh, you're just making it up to gain ground in custody proceedings, right? You haven't said anything all this time in the marriage. Now, that's not necessarily true either. Oftentimes, in a lot of cases, there is a history where things were reported to other people and even to authorities, right? Some of us have cases that literally have police reports with interruption with 911 phone calls while violent incidences were going on, where there were other issues, including but not limited to strangulation situations, where maybe even law enforcement agencies on their own, without, in many cases, the mom asking for it. Maybe they filed neglect or abuse against the father while the relationship was going on. So some of us, like myself, in one particular dynamic and relationship, some of us will have documented records literally from 2002 all the way to 2015 and 2016. However, it doesn't always mean that someone, i.e. the person engaging in family violence, child abuse, or neglect, gets charged, and that there's any conviction records. And unfortunately, a lot of times rules of evidence in court proceedings is the fact that someone's been arrested doesn't automatically mean, see, there's proof. The police came, they were arrested. I've got a report, I can prove it. The whole neighborhood was standing by and watching and everybody was traumatized. Unfortunately, due to rules of evidence, an arrest, because someone isn't convicted, based on the premise of innocent until proven guilty, it's not evidence. And so if you happen to be a safe, protective parent who has been arrested, like I have, illegally and unlawfully, detained, right, imprisoned, illegally and unlawfully, as a matter of witness tampering, obstruction of justice, it's actually good for us too, because it means, yes, it happened, but that does not mean that it was a valid situation that we've now been convicted of. And it means that something has occurred. It has been founded. It means it was alleged. It means someone's rights were definitely deprived. And now we got to figure out, should that have legally and lawfully happened? Of course, in my case, multiple attorneys, as well as myself and others that know how to just read. We don't have law degrees, but we read. And we also know and understand the laws of the state of Texas and Oklahoma. We know that it was an illegal and lawful arrest to silence me for cooperating with alleged CPS and police investigations that I now know ultimately nobody was really truly, honestly, legally, lawfully, and integrity actually investigating. It was more of, how do we keep concealing, calling mom a liar, protecting all of us for all of our concealments over the years, and how do we work together, two states, agencies of people in terms of law enforcement and CPS. Now, I'm very disheartened that Oklahoma jumped in and went along so easily, because they really didn't have any issues with me and our family. But again, systemically, because of the rules of good faith, when one law enforcement agency reaches out to another, they basically tell them what to think, right? They say, hey, we got a problem over here. Here's the problem person. Here's what we believe. And they're like, okay, we got you, right? They're going to rubber stamp it in their jurisdiction and basically give good faith, because from one CPS agency to another, from one police department to another, there can actually be a situation that we see playing out every day, which is that there are dirty cops, there are dirty CPS workers, there's dirty judges, there are unlawful, illegal, law-breaking professionals committing crimes in all of these arenas. And unfortunately, because they all are in the same profession and field together, they tend to go ahead and already have a confirmation bias that whatever we're being told from our fellow colleagues, whether across state line, in the same county, same jurisdiction, typically that's the truth. And the member of the public, if it's in opposition, they're not telling the truth. It's a very dangerous way to engage in alleged investigations and credible professional work, but it happens, right? And the other aspect of that is that when that's done, it's done in apathy, right? It's done in apathy that says, we don't really care. It's just another case. It's just another number. At the end of the day, when we clock out, when we go home, when we turn in our badges, we're living our life, we're collecting our paychecks, and it's not our problem. Can't save the world, any number of different things that people say to themselves. So before I get too off track from the two things that I mentioned that happens in relationships when things finally are disclosed the most, and yes, they have to be alleged in custody or divorce proceedings. The second thing that happens is there's so much fear and intimidation, coercive power and control, abuse dynamics, that it's not safe enough, right, for them to be able to discuss it. And it's not safe enough while they're still in the relationship, still living in the home, because why? There a lot of times is instant retaliation or perceived retaliation or the legitimate fear and risk of retaliation, right? Studies have shown overwhelmingly the most dangerous time for victims of domestic violence and abuse, family violence, is not necessarily when they're there, although obviously they're winding up in hospitals, police departments, and phone calls for a reason. It is dangerous, but a lot of times the escalations to unalivement occur over 75% once they've left, right? And so it really does take a lot of people that are trapped under these balance in power dynamics. It takes them a minute to decide, I'm going to leave. And then if they've left, takes a lot of people a lot of time to decide, not only am I going to leave, but I'm going to speak out. And now I actually have to attest to, under penalty of perjury, dealing with police, dealing with CPS, sometimes domestic violence agencies that then report to CPS if kids were in the home and witnessed it. Now they have to decide, I'm going to take a chance at continuing freedom. I'm going to trust that the institutions being paid by taxpayers to help protect us are going to do that. And because we disclose, they're going to help set us free and make sure that in us doing it the right way, we can be free. And then, of course, what do they find? They find, unfortunately, continued institutional betrayal, continued apathy. Now, the average person in society, if they have not gone through personally or have not gone through these dynamics with someone that they know, love, and are close to, when we talk about the things that are going on, again, you don't even think that there's a concept of court crimes, right? Because we all hear these things passed around in the media of immunity, right? Judges and police have immunity, which means if they ever do anything wrong, oh, you can't go after them because they have immunity, right? That means they can do whatever they want to do. There's no way that we can go after them. And I do not perpetuate those dynamics and those misconstrued views of the totality of what can be done when criminal acts are done and committed by those in power. Because, of course, we also see reports where DAs, police, even judges, definitely attorneys, child protection workers, there's cases all day, every day that are going on all across the country where, yes, they're winding up with criminal charges, they're being charged, they're being convicted, and apparently they're not above the law. Apparently nobody is, right? But the mainstream belief is this stuff can't be happening, right? If they're in the job, the literal job of child protection services, they are in the role and position of literal protect and serve law enforcement. Well, if you're saying you have a problem and you contacted police and CPS and they didn't do anything, well, then the assumption is, well, what you were talking about must not have been legitimate, because if it had, well, then police would have done something. CPS would have done something. Oh man, if you just tell the judge and you provide some proof, then, definitely it's admitted and they would have done something. The average person in society believes those things, and to sleep at night, to be completely honest, unless you're going through it and you don't have the luxury of living in that protective bubble that we're safe and everything goes well when you reach out to the authorities paid by taxpayers to do a job, right? Most of us need to believe that so that we can continue to sleep at night. It's very unsettling. It's very disturbing. It's very unnerving to realize that we are living in safe communities that we do so much to lock our doors, right? To be protective of any random strangers and criminals and people that might be up to no good. We always perceive that they are the harm, hurt, and danger looking to come and impact our families. We don't think about them being the ones that we may call when we hit 911. And I do want to go ahead and say this. If you happen to be watching and you're a member of law enforcement, you have law enforcement in your family, listen, my personal position, I said this in another live, how I feel about law enforcement is honestly, I don't want to live in a society without law enforcement. Now, that may seem counterintuitive. As a Black woman in America, a lot of people say, well, based on the history of law enforcement in this country, you really shouldn't want them to be around. That's not necessarily my experience, number one, and how I was raised. I grew up in Silicon Valley, so I didn't grow up in a lot of dynamics that a lot of African Americans have, where, things are just different. I'll just say that, right? Take Silicon Valley and you take inner cities, the experiences, the socialization, the culture, the upbringing is certainly different. And that is not to negate, downplay, prefer, lift up one over the other. They're just different. And so my construct growing up didn't have those dynamics attached to it. I didn't have a reason to fear just because of the history of what law enforcement was used for back in the day as fugitive slave patrols, right? That's not what they're doing technically today. They're not supposed to be. And so I don't have that dynamic. But then the other thing, as a survivor of domestic violence and abuse, and them being the exact number, 911, that I have had to call so many times, right? Unfortunately, patternistically, as is common in most situations, until we do the work to break the cycle and get out, have to call them to stop acts that are going on in the moment, or to provide some form of assistance, whether that's medical assistance or whether that is save my life tonight, right? And there's been too many incidences where I can't imagine not being able to call and to stop whatever terror is going on in that moment. Now, a lot in society then say, well, when that happens, and then she says, no, I don't want to press charges, right? That there's something wrong with her, right? This is why it's happening, because when the police were going to press charges, you asked not to. Well, again, there's different dynamics. If the woman is married to that man, there's going to be dynamics of that's my husband, right? If she has any form of faith basis, like for instance, a Christian religion, or we're supposed to forgive and give grace and mercy, there is heavy religious pressure, right, to forgive, because nobody's perfect, as a matter of fact, right? Only one man that walked the earth was. And so you have all these other things that are internal, that are going on mentally, emotionally, culturally, that are also saying, you know what, we didn't die, let bygones be bygones. And of course, that's very dangerous, because oftentimes it continues and it doesn't stop. It's not an isolated one-time incident. Not that even if it was a one-time incident, it'd be okay. But my point is, domestic violence, family violence, a lot of times it's a pattern, right? Well, it's not a lot of times, that's what it is. It's a pattern of behavior that also includes coercive control. And that's a whole nother conversation. I don't want to get too far into the weeds and off track tonight. But at the end of the day, you have those dynamics a lot of times. If you maybe don't have the marriage, maybe you don't have the faith-based structure of, till death do us part, even if it kills us. And definitely thoughts and prayers to all of the survivors that literally that was their fate. Okay, I say that kind of laughing, but understanding it's not a laughing matter. It happens. It happens every day all across the country, in religious communities especially, because everybody gives this great pressure to stay in it until literally death do they have to part. So definitely prayers, heart, lots of love to those that have been the loved ones that have experienced this. It should have never been that way, and no, it's not God's design. But all of that said, we wind up in these situations where also, maybe if there's not a marriage, it's just they've got shared children together, right? And so the shared children is, well, kids need their father, they need their mother, they need both parents. And again, my personal opinion is I would prefer that, yes, if it takes the makeup of two individuals to create a child, then there's probably a reason that they need to raise that child. At the same time, I've been both a married and a single mom. And so I know that if children by choice or by sets of circumstances, no, they did not sign up for, they wind up as single parents, or they choose from the beginning to be single parents, right? Is it possible? Can children be loved fully and totally and completely by one parent or one truly committed, loving caregiver? Absolutely. Do we have incredible human beings, adults, individuals that are the product of single parent homes, being raised by grandparents, being raised in any number of different dynamics and situations? Absolutely. And so I think that we need to really stop overplaying the fact that just because they don't have an unhealthy, unsafe, and toxic family member, whether that's a mother or a father, that all is lost and their life is in a ditch because they don't have both, right? I think what studies have shown, what reality has shown in so many situations, is if there had to be a decision, it's better for them to have one reasonably safe, not perfect, but basically safe or good enough, as they've done studies, parent or caregiver, as opposed to one toxic one in that mix that is now creating harm to the other. And then the child doesn't have anybody that's fully and totally stable and calm and grounded. And so ultimately, what do you have with people all around us that are watching these dynamics, that they're hearing these stories? You also have that neutral position, right? People say, I don't want to get involved. I don't want to pick and choose sides. Well, when there is an oppressor and there is someone or people being oppressed, being neutral means that you are choosing the side of the oppressor, right? I have to stay neutral to the fact that they are constantly harming you. I don't want to say anything about the harm that's being done to you. I don't want to get involved. Okay, but I'm being beaten to a pulp here. Hey, my children are being harmed here. Yeah, that's not for me to get involved in. Okay, so you're literally watching us die a slow death, and because you don't want to get involved and you want to stay neutral, wait, we just stopped breathing. How neutral is that? You stood by and let it happen. I guarantee most of us, if we had homes, we were on a vacation, or we're gone for the weekend, and we have a neighbor across the street that is watching our home actively be burglarized, that is watching our vehicle actively be smashed, windows smashed, people are grabbing stuff out of the front seat, and we're right there, we're video recording it with a phone in our hand, where our neighbor could call 911. I know, if we're being honest, there's not a person with the sound of my voice that would say, hey, it's not their business. I want them to stay neutral. Just watch it. At least they can tell me what happened, tell me what they were wearing, but I don't want them to do anything to intervene. I don't want them to call anyone else to intervene where they could actually stop it, right? That's not their job. I mean, everybody's got their lives. They got their own stuff going on. So, it's completely acceptable for my neighbors to stay out of it because they got their own life, and like, hey, tell me about it when I get back. That's insane. None of us would want to live in neighborhoods where that's the case. Unfortunately, too many people do live in neighborhoods where that's the case. But for those of us that do have resources and do have choice, we typically choose to be in places where we look out for each other, where a lot of that going on is hopefully minimized. And hopefully, if it does go on, it's happening in jurisdictions where then, again, we can call that number 911, whomever it is, to be able to come in and restore peace to the environment so that we aren't victimized. It seems like the only time it's appropriate to use the word victim is outside of the realm of any kind of domestic and family dynamics. Because when you use victim in those situations, well, it takes two to tango. And now all of a sudden, again, it's forbidden language, and we shouldn't judge, and we shouldn't get involved. And ultimately, what are these all signs of? Apathy, right? The extreme pain, evil, and harm of others is not our business. Life's hard. We got a lot to do. Can't save the world, and definitely can't put myself at risk. I mean, while that is a legitimate concern, and we should always use wisdom when we're assisting someone in a difficult or dangerous situation, again, what happens when it's somebody that we love and now it's our turn? Do we want everyone else to say the same thing to us? I'd love to get involved and help you, but hey, I got to take care of me and mine. Sorry, your house is getting destroyed. Sorry, your house is burning down, and we're not even going to call the fire department because, heaven forbid, we might be a witness. We might be called into court to talk about whether or not it was arson or not. And we just, I don't want to be negative. I don't want to be involved. Y'all, I'm making light of things that are not light, but this is literally what apathy looks like. Can't be bothered to be caring, concerning, or involved. That's why they call people bystanders, because they're standing by, allowing the decimation of individuals, families, which then turns into communities. And what happens when we continue to allow things to go on that none of us would ever want to be on the receiving end of them going on? They spread, and eventually they come to our households. Now, what are some of the reasons that people may be coming off as a little bit more apathetic? Maybe they're survivors themselves. Maybe it's triggering. There are many of you that are listening, that are watching, that you have your own stories when you were a child. And maybe you were a child in a home where abuse was very real, the dynamics were going on, and you had to witness and survive child abuse, or watching the domestic violence and abuse of your other parent at the hands of one of your parents, right? Which is child abuse. For a child to witness that, I'm very sorry that you had to go through it. It creates dynamics. It may create dynamics that say, hey, I got out of it, I survived, I don't want to go back there, I don't want to relive that, I don't want the vicarious trauma, I don't want the secondhand trauma, so again, I'm staying out of it. It's still apathetic. And I'm going to encourage us to not be angels of apathy. I'm going to encourage us to reconsider doing unto others what we would have done unto us. That if by chance it was one of our family members living in a neighborhood, a state, a locality, a jurisdiction that we were not in, and we didn't know something was going on in their home, what would we want their neighbors to do? What would we want the churches, the various different religious communities that they're a part of? What would we want their business partners, their coworkers? What would we want their so-called friends to do if for some reason we lived states away, we didn't know what was going on in their day-to-day? We didn't know what was happening to our grandchildren. We didn't know what was happening to our nieces and our nephews and our cousins, right? And to people that we loved. What would we want the people around them to do? And so I've been talking now for about 25 minutes about various different ways that apathy shows up within the system, within being outside the system, right? The people in society. And now I want to kind of pivot to what is also rising nationwide. Yes, there's more people that are sticking their fingers in their ears and la, 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 la. I want to stay positive. I don't want to be negative. I don't want to hear it. I'm tuning out negative news, constant negative news. I'm not doing that because I'm on a mission to create a better life and a better day, and I can't take that in. While again, we all have to balance ourselves and know we cannot consume constant negative news all day, every day, and twice on Sunday. We can't. Everybody has to balance and take a break. I get that. I agree with that. I even have to do that. I have a big advocacy heart. I've been doing advocacy for other families while I've been dealing with my own trauma and my own fight to freedom for at least 11 years now, right? Since 2013. And there are times that I just have to stop. It's too much in my own situation or on behalf of others. And so you have to do the same. And we all have to mind our own mental health, our own dynamics of what we need to focus on in the moment. But generally, if you don't have a spirit of apathy, which is if it's not affecting me, I really don't care until it does. If you don't have that spirit, even when you're in difficult times, there will still be something in you that says, you know what? Everybody can't do everything, but as one person, I can do something. It's a difference in the heart and the spirit of people that have suffered much and gone through much and been alone, that when they see the hurt and pain of others, they can't help but respond, right? And again, what that looks like for all of us is different. But one of the things I want to go ahead and talk about now is how I'm encouraged that even though, yes, over the years, and I was going to actually go over a document, it has no names, it doesn't mention anyone, and I may or may not do that. I think I want to probably save that for a time. It's a little bit more interactive because I don't think I probably set up this live properly to have enough people join. I think I do see a couple of people. I can't see your comments. I can't see who you are, and I apologize. I'm going to work on getting better. I'm still learning all of this going live on different platforms in different ways. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate you. And you could be doing anything this Friday 13th, right? But you're here. And so I really appreciate it. Of course, anyone that watches the replay, appreciate you taking the time. But I want to say that I'm being encouraged and just seeing the spirit, not just of apathy, where people just don't care because it's not happening to me and mine, but also seeing the great spirit of courage and tenacity, right? Relentlessness, high integrity, right? This ability to say, even though I'm in the midst of my own pain, I can take a moment to care about someone else. And of course, I've been continuing to say thank you while I was in custody, punished for protecting, and even when I got out. I want to say it again, because you all truly spoke up when I could not use my voice. You all spoke for me, and you spoke louder than I ever could, than I ever have, and louder than I've ever been heard in over 11 years. Now, you all know the story in the little snippets that you've heard about what's going on with my daughter right now. But many of you don't even know there's a whole 11-year family court backstory. For those of you that have seen my interview two-part interview with One Mom's Battle, right? Founder of National Family Court Awareness Month. Those of you that have seen my family court story, then you've heard that there's a little bit more dynamics, but I also stay very focused as to the current situation because I cannot get into the weeds of all of the dynamics that have been going on, yes, since 2013 for over 11 years now. And I don't think I can do that here today. I am going to start delving into some other things, but I also want to be responsible. I'm pro se, I'm in active litigation. And that means that while we are pro se self-represented, the courts do expect us to act as much like an attorney as attorneys would, to be responsible with information, not leaking every aspect of the process. Yes, the courts are to be open. Yes, we are not to be gagged. It is our constitutional right to talk about our experiences as long as they're truthful. Otherwise, it's defamation. But if it's truthful, we have the right to do that. And thankfully, where I'm from in North Texas, one of our judges that was a judge and now is an elected justice, she's even taught to bar associations that she believes any form of gag orders in family law cases is unconstitutional. A lot of people where I am do believe that. Does that mean there have not been gag orders that come out of my county? Of course, there has been. Does that mean that some people have been given gag orders? Like, for instance, there is a big national case that actually got the governor and the AG of Texas to chime in. Apparently that dad was under a gag order and there was no consequences. He's now potentially looking at a position in Congress, right? Because of his family law matter that he turned into a blog and that he was able to get publicity and elicit the, responses from our highest officials. So ultimately, as for me, if you've been watching my lives, you know that I like to be as responsible as possible. That means I'm not sharing people's names, addresses, phone numbers, details. I don't, not a component of doxing. It's actually illegal in some states like Texas. There are some components that if you're releasing names, addresses, contact information, and the public shows up, right? The homes of judges, law enforcement officers, other protected parties, it can actually be criminal. And so I'm very, very careful not to even personally put that information out there. Of course, this is 2024. Right, so people can do their own digging, they can do their own figuring. I'm certainly not going to police the internet, and I'm not going to manage it. I'm also not going to be held responsible for what everyone does. So I just try to be responsible when I'm live, when I'm talking about things, to mind my mood, matter, and tone, and also mind the things that I do share as well as the things that I don't. So that said, I do want to say, if it had not been for you all standing up and speaking and crying out and saying, alert, 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 we have a problem in Oklahoma and Texas, I honestly don't know what would have happened, right? I was taken into custody in a jurisdiction where they knew I couldn't bond out because I had no charges, right? Apparently it was a pocket warrant meant for the element of shock, surprise, we got you, right? We told you to show up because we're doing a legitimate investigation. We got you and your daughter comfortable, and then we swiped you off the street, stuck you in a jail, as if you're a criminal, and then, oops, maybe someone forgot to flick a switch and record the interview, not even getting into that. Deep breath. Child advocacy centers, they have multifaceted purposes to them. And it's supposed to be a multidisciplinary team that is present. So a lot of times you will have members of specially trained Child Protective Service forensic interviewers, right? They are supposed to be trained not to ask leading questions, but to be able to decipher and allow children to kind of lead what they want to disclose or not disclose. A lot of times you have members of law enforcement. They're typically not supposed to be visible to the child because, a lot of times they're threatened. Children that are undergoing investigation, which is witness tampering when it's done, that if you disclose against the parent being investigated or the person being investigated, they're going to arrest you or something bad is going to happen. Someone's going to die, right? So they typically, law enforcement is out of sight and view when you're talking about interviewing children, but a lot of times they might be behind screens, they're listening. There's some form of communication with the forensic interview and law enforcement that they may have their own questions because they're looking at it. They're supposed to be looking at it from the standpoint of what we would need for a criminal investigation, while Child Protective Services, they look at things differently if they're talking about certain types of abuse, neglect, failure to neglect. And so a lot of times these investigations are going on simultaneously, which is what I was told and what would have been appropriate in my daughter's case that was reported by two professionals, not me. Right? I was blamed for that in my arrest warrant affidavit, and they know it was not me. So again, When we get arrest warrant affidavits to rip people off the street and deprive their rights, we better be doing it based on accurate information that we know and not specifically inaccurate information that we intentionally and knowingly understand is not truthful when we ask a judge to sign off on it. But I'm not giving legal advice. I'm not an attorney and I don't play one on TV. All of that said, the multidisciplinary approach is supposed to make it more comfortable for children, right? Where they're in a position that they feel calm and comfortable to be able to talk. They don't feel the intimidation. They don't feel the pressure to say or not say anything. It's supposed to be a safer way to have it done, but there's supposed to be video and audio recorded because body language matters. And so that is one of the various reasons that in certain situations, if they call for a forensic interview, then we obviously know the most important thing we're doing by having a child brought to a center that is set up to feel like a home, but has cameras running, and we've even told the child cameras are running, make sure we flip the switch before we start the interview. When that doesn't happen, we're not going to call that an accident. We're going to call that professional incompetence and negligence, and we're also going to call it obstruction, so that when someone happens to say, oh, there was coaching, it's their one person's professional opinion, or others that, again, are a part of deprivation of rights, illegal and unlawful arrest and imprisonment. And we can't actually see the child's body language to see this is not a coached child at all. But it's interesting that some investigations, I will say, oops, we went through the whole thing where the child is actually doing drawings and we're seeing body language. The child actually even asks about, hey, am I going to get in trouble? Because I know I'm not supposed to talk about certain things. But at the end of the entire interview, oh gosh darn it, might have been a technological error. And I think a switch didn't get flipped. Darn. It's over now. Yeah. I'm not saying that happened in my daughter's case, but if it did, I would be upset just like anybody else. Again, apathy of professionals that have one job to do, and that is to secure the integrity of the child's investigation, outcries or not, and make sure that can be viewed by all parties to make a different decision. And it doesn't just ride on a couple of people that are participating in illegal and unlawful arrest and witness tampering of a non-suspect parent and child. So thankfully, I mean, all is not lost. If that were my situation, I'm not saying that it is, I'm not saying it isn't. There's other evidence before we even got there. But there can also be the intentional and knowing dismissal of evidence. I don't know, things like x-rays, things like medical records. If we've already decided our bias is against one party that we want to destroy and silence, and our bias is for another party that we want to make sure that we protect to no end in their abuse, neglect, and criminal behavior. Again, hence stop court crimes. This is a shirt. I want to give a shout out to the agency that actually created this shirt. It is the Center for Judicial Excellence out of Marin County, California. They actually have done the research, right? They track cases that arise out of family court matters, domestic relations matters, so divorce and custody cases where unfortunately children end up unalived by a parent that oftentimes the safe parent begged and pleaded family courts, CPS, law enforcement to protect, and they just didn't have the moral will, courage, lawfulness, integrity, ethics, lack of apathy to care until that child wound up unalived. And it's unfortunate. But that's what's happening. So back to focus on those of you with great courage. Had you all not spoken up, I don't really know what the plan would have been, or if it was just confidence that she's not going to be able to bond out, she'll sit in there, we'll return the kid, and everything's going to be fine. But God and but all of you, right? So what I want to say to apathy is, if you're feeling like this is an impossible situation, for me, my daughter and I, we were separated for over 8 long years. She's 10 and a half. That is over 80% of her life. And I need to say this, do not have any drugs, no alcohol, no abuse, no neglect, no family violence, no criminal record, have never been found to be an unfit parent, have raised 7 children, right? Birthed and had 5 by natural blessing, 5 by natural birth, 2 by extra blessing, right? In my second marriage, those were my bonus sons. And so have never been deemed unfit in any way by any court, CPS, police, or anybody else, right? And still, although on the other side, there is 30 plus years of criminal convictions. I'm not getting into that right now and all the court crimes that have continued to ignore and deny and suppress that. But what I will say is that it was a long time and a long battle to be able to get that time back together to defend and offend and restore the parent-child relationship. And unfortunately, oftentimes, again, if you have people that are not acting in integrity and lawfulness, when the law-abiding person, the non-abusing safe person, re-enters the situation, and obviously things are disclosed or things continue to happen, now there's going to be friction because now they can't continue to abuse and neglect and commit crimes without impunity and just tell the child, shut up, don't be disrespectful, you're not in control, and we all control you. Now, again, I teach my children to be respectful. I don't teach them to go against authority, certainly not police, not at school, and so no one can claim that I do. But at the same time, abuse is a different dynamic. Neglect is a different dynamic. Nobody is supposed to sit there and take care of and just accept the fact that other people are being harmful in ways that the law does not support, in ways that, again, those of us that serve a higher power, God's law, man's law doesn't support, right? And so what I tell my daughter, what I've always taught her, because I don't want her harmed worse, is don't fight. If we're ever separated at any time, don't fight, act normal, go back to life as usual, know that God is still in full and total control. He will work it out. And so I imagine that's probably what she's doing. We've had many conversations about just understanding that God is still in full and total control. Now, everybody doesn't have that faith component. Many people through this battle have lost their faith. For me, it's the only reason I'm still standing strong. People say I'm strong and I'm bold and I'm courageous and I'm a warrior. It's because I have deep-rooted beliefs that will not die. That God causes all things to work together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes in Christ Jesus. That is Romans 8:28 and Genesis 50:20. What the enemy intended for evil, God intended for good to bring about this present result. What is the present result? At the end of this, I'm probably going to shut this down about 45 minutes. We're at 42 and a half minutes. The present result is that people are understanding we now live in a world where we don't have to wait for mainstream media to check their legal department, check their risks, check all their relationships to decide if they're going to report a story correctly or if they're going to report it with bias. If they're going to report it to be able to tell people, hey, nothing to see here. You might have someone reaching out on a Facebook or social media channel screaming that there is corruption going on and crimes and injustice. But no. We're the real reporters, and this is what we have to say, right? What I'm saying is that we are in a new day. We're in a date and time. It's called social media. It means that we can be social from me to you and you to me, and we can spread the word. And we actually even have the ability to go viral. Right? News stations are typically, compartmentalized to particular regions or a particular base of viewers, right? Maybe there might be more right-leaning or more left-leaning or more, I don't know, in the middle, which is kind of more me. But anyways, whatever the case may be, we have different sources that people tend to continue to go to that continue to give more confirmation for what they typically choose to believe or the perspectives that they align with. There's nothing wrong with that. We have free speech and the freedom to be able to subscribe to the information sources that we deem to be the most credible. Social media allows people to just continue to be you and be me and hopefully be ethically sharing our stories and our situations. Sometimes that's providing evidence and putting it out there, and sometimes that is being very careful in what we do and how we do it, especially when there's laws pertaining to the release of information. But what it means is that also we give ourselves and others the opportunity to be able to vet and say, you know what, do I think this person's telling the truth or I think they're full of it, right? Is there any legitimacy to the fact that they are telling the same story that it appears that different people in different jurisdictions all across the country and internationally are sharing, right? And it's not because they're, copying one another and they're reading the same book. And so now I'm creating the version of the same story. No, it's because it's actually happening. And I'm saying that the army of people that are willing to stand up and speak out against these evils and against the apathy that is allowing it to go on. Y'all, I believe now we're the majority. I was forced to have to make the most difficult decision ever, and that is to go underground and to flee Texas trauma and Texas terror in 2016. I'm not getting into that story today in this live, but when I had to make that decision, I continued to reach out. I actually even paid an attorney in the Midwest over $3,000 to reach out so that I could come back. Problem is, I had a court-appointed attorney that was supposed to be my attorney that wasn't doing anything. When you have an attorney on the file, you can't have other attorneys intervening, and they're not going to talk to you. So I actually had one that was standing in the way for 5 years, oppressing me being able to come back and resolve the pending matters against me so that I could fight for my daughter. That's a part of why I am thankful that the now justice did go ahead and recall those warrants when she got new information that that court-appointed defense attorney had actually taken private funds to try to take my other child. Houston, we have a problem. But what I'm going to say, and then one of the detectives that was supposed to be investigating some felony impersonation, stalking, and also serious terroristic threats against me while I was underground, that person came out to be a dual member of a 10-member Mid-Cities drug trafficking ring and is now a convicted felon. Lord have mercy. So again, I want to say to law enforcement that you risk your lives every day to protect our families and our communities. Thank you. Sincere, heartfelt thank you. I mean that. For the good ones. For those that are not acting lawfully and law-abiding, you make it bad for your colleagues. You make relations between the people and authorities horrific. You make us all as a nation have to go through things we shouldn't have to go through. And so ultimately, if that's you, I'm not talking to you right now. But for the ones that make our society truly a better place and truly do their best to protect and serve, what I have to say is when I took that time to get myself and my child safe and try to reach out for law-abiding help that I thought I would find as soon as I got out of the state of Texas, and then just found out it's a national problem, there were many law enforcement officers, attorneys, right? Many child protection workers, many medical professionals, many people in various different religious communities that were not in the same jurisdiction of all the corruption, because a lot of times they play together. Yes, they do. People have to get permits. They have to get additional resources. There's all kinds of, look, anything that man is a part of can be corrupted. We just know that. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and it happens in every sector of society. We all know this. And so sometimes, yes, you got to get out of the jurisdiction that you're in where people are not either fear-mongered, legitimately threatened, biased, or have some other interest to say, we don't want to hear it, we're not entertaining it. If you're going to keep talking about it, you need to go, or to just start acting in such a way that you realize you're not welcome and you need to go. Sometimes you got to get out of your jurisdiction, and I am not advocating that people flee with children in the middle of custody cases. There will likely be serious consequences if you do that, so I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying, in my situation, with all the dynamics I've been dealing with for years that, again, I'm not getting into right now in this live, that was a difficult decision I had to make. I actually didn't even plan to make it. And again, I'll get into that story at another time. My point is, I want you all to be encouraged that while it may seem all is lost, politically speaking, religiously speaking, culturally speaking, nationally speaking, the only reason I'm still here today is it wasn't even people that I knew. It wasn't friends and family members. I didn't want to put them in a position to be questioned, to have to give information or withhold information. It was strangers. It was good men and women all across this country that stood up for me and stood up for my children. These were landowners. These were business owners. These were pastors. These were community members. These were churches. These were just good people all across the country that said, wow, if this is going on, I must do something. How can I help in this moment? If this is going on in the way that you speak about it, many of them, especially in Pennsylvania and New York and the rural parts of Pennsylvania and New York, said, you need to run for office. And I would continue to tell people, if you never suggest that again, we can remain friends. And I meant it. Don't really want to have anything to do with politics or law at this point, but that's a whole nother ball game about running from things that are clearly probably in your future at some point. But right now, I don't have any plans for any of that. Not writing a book, not doing a movie, although I was continuously asked about that too. Right now, I'm still trying to survive my family court story, focus on getting my daughter safe, focusing on also knowing that I'm safe, whether I'm in Texas or Oklahoma, because right now, the things that have happened, they've not made us very, very safe. And that's just a reality. It's not paranoia. It is our reality. Positively real reality. And so ultimately, what I've got to say is, if you happen to be one of those individuals that's out there, that you were a part of our underground years wilderness season journey from literal coast to coast, for whom I said one day, I hope we'll be able to reconnect. But of course, I don't ever disclose those that are helping me. I protect the people that are protecting me. So I'm not getting ready to give a list of names or anything like that. But if you happen to see me again, thank you. God bless you. Wouldn't have made it without you. If you happen to participate from November 6th to date in sharing posts and giving and supporting in any way and praying and showing up in any capacity, again, thank you. Heartfelt thank you and appreciation. Couldn't have done it without you. And I know that I am not anyone special, right? I am one mom in a battle, a sea of many in many battles. My story is your story is my story. Understand that sometimes you may have to look outside of your current sphere of people that you're dealing with, systemically, personally, communally. Does not necessarily mean fling. It just means be willing to reach out to others, because now in 2024, people are clearly listening. They are standing up. They are speaking up, right? They are leveling up. And they are realizing we are saying absolutely abuse no more, injustice no more. I'm inspired because I'm finding out in my home state of Oklahoma, right? In Tulsa County, there's a group of people working on a grand jury petition to address the state's DHS and CPS system, the same one that, sorry. There are people that are addressing it, right? The power of the people and the people in power, even senators. And I imagine that is going across Democratic and Republican bipartisan support lines, because we all want to be safe. We want our families safe. We want to live in a country that is not barbaric and allowing terroristic behavior to continue unchecked domestically or systemically. That's where we want to be. But at the end of the day, what if so many of us heard and realized that we have to do, or we're waiting for someone else to fix it? Sometimes we have to be the change. Sometimes we have to be the change that we wish to see. And so a lot of you have continued to stand up and fight for me in the season, fight for my children in the season. Again, I will not be able to ever stop thanking you enough. Many of you say, look, it was you. You were the one in the courtroom. You were the one that's had to fight. But yeah, support system matters. So what I want to tell you is that after 11 years of, for the most part, not having big, massive mainstream support, and we haven't, right? I also have a son that, yes, in April of this year, members of the same police department, one said that he was hanging, the other said he was always on the ground. So again, inconsistencies from the same department showing up to the same scene. We've been in the midst of that. And that is still a very huge, gaping grief, pain that I'm going through simultaneously with everything that's happening with my daughter in family courts and CPS and police in Texas, on both sides of the border, with me sandwiched in between both of them, saying at some point I'm going to find honest, lawful, law-abiding powers to resolve these issues. And so what I have to say is, after 11 years of not even being shocked and surprised at anything that I see from anyone in the system, painfully, but also being the recipient of those that have given generously, right? And I'm not just talking about resources, but even advice when I was out, right? I'll never forget, there was someone, I will not say where he was. I'll say he was a multi-decades member of law enforcement in another state. I told him the story, what I've been dealing with from 13, 14, 15, and now going into 16. And he says to me, I may lose my job one day, but I'm a man of God before I'm a cop. And it sounds like you need to keep going, weigh the pros and cons for you and your baby girl, because if you went back to Texas, they probably would kill you. Well, okay then. Thank you, officer. I'm laughing because, again, many of you actually understand under high stress, very serious situations. It's actually a balancing thing. So I do a lot of laughing, so I don't cry all the time. So anyways, with that, it's a very serious moment. I'm thankful that he was honest enough to tell me. I've been in law enforcement a long time. Normally we hear cases like this in very small towns and jurisdictions. Sounds like you're from a larger one. Don't need to know where. I'm looking at, again, the laws where I know you have a right to protect yourself and your child. I'm looking at also man's law, God's law. I'm looking at the fact that I have moral and ethical compasses that are leading me and guiding me in this conversation. And so again, I will never be extreme to say there is a particular group of people or a particular group of society professionally that I just can't go along with. There's a reason why I stay balanced, and I will continue to understand there are good apples and there are bad apples. And again, I know it's a whole nother conversation. They're like, it's the whole bunch. I'm not getting there. And that's not been my personal experience. So I don't have those extreme beliefs. Our system is broken. Yes, we need to stop court crimes and also crimes occurring in and out of courthouses. Are there great judges? Yes. Are they few and far in between a lot of times in these dynamics? Unfortunately, yes. But are they there? Yeah. And do I also believe that as we continue to not just expose evil, but also expose good, right? Celebrate those. I'm not talking about trying to develop personal relationships and inappropriate relationships, reaching out to judges. We don't need to do that. What I'm talking about is it okay to say, hey, even though I've been in turmoil for 11 years, and yes, this particular judge did a whole bunch of stuff that probably shouldn't have been done, but then they at least finally, even if sua sponte, which means on their own without motion or hearing, they got it right. I'm going to tell both stories. I'm going to always remain in integrity to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Those that know me and have watched my fight literally since 2013, I'm good for it. It's the only way that I will fight. And so ultimately, that is not to discredit or dismiss anyone's feelings of they're all corrupt, they're all bad. Again, everyone's experience is different. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, their frame of reference, their perspective. I honor it. I support it. I'm not here to judge or tell anybody what they need to say, think, feel, how they need to process, even purposeful pain. Some people say, no, it wasn't to make me stronger. It made me more traumatized. And that's true. The body keeps the score. So all of our situations are different. All of our dynamics are different. In many ways, a lot of the issues we deal with is same script, different cast, right? With very few differences. Obviously, the individuals involved. At the same time, the thing that is not different, and I believe can be a unifier, as I'm actually going into about an hour, and I am going to shut this down at an hour, is yes, apathy is at an all-time high. For those, again, that biblically believe that in the end times, people will get ultimately, with all the things that scripture says will happen, more narcissistic, more self-serving, more me focused. I got to also say, y'all, I am encouraged by the fact that there is also this rising army of focus of it's you, it's me, it's we, it's all of us that together will be the change. And we'll be the ones to make the difference because we did. So to all of you, that is who you are. That's who you're going to continue to be. I want to say I'm thankful and grateful that I get to live in a world, in a space, in this place, in this moment, in this time with you. I will do everything I can to continue to extend and lend my voice and my support, privately or publicly, as much as makes sense. again, I'm going to stay focused, prioritizing my daughter, and so definitely basing my decisions based on how I continue to go through my active legal situation. And I'm sure none of you would expect me to do anything different. I wouldn't expect you to either. But thank you that you all have taught me this November and this December that while apathy is at an all-time high, so is the resiliency of the people that say, new day, new time. We're making a difference and we're doing it together. So for that, again, I thank you. Thank you for joining me. I hope that you all have a wonderful Friday the 13th, whatever that looks like for you, wherever you might be in the nation, in the world. And I'm glad that we're having a moment to connect. I'm going to try to get my social media on track where I know how to do this more interactively. I would have loved to hear from some of you, but thanks for joining, whether live on the replay. Love y'all. Look forward to talking with you soon. Well, bye.